So, folks, this is the SIG Security Meeting of Nephew. The agenda item. So, in the last week when we met, there was a demo provided by Prashant and Shiv. The demo was primarily about the automation of the workload registration. So, as part of workload identity, we have to register the workloads now. So, as part of that, maybe Prashant, can you take us uh, through that briefly? So, that was one action item. The other was there was an issue that was raised on Nephew project by an external pen tester who brought out an issue about in the context of over provision mutation, over provision permissions for a mutating webhook. And the point that she raised was that, is it possible for us to constrain it further? So what we discussed was in the last call that we might want to take up an action item, which would include scanning of basically an integration of ISC scanning tool as part of primary Nephew project. So this is one of the thing that we discussed. The reason being most of the Nephew code is actually related to infrastructure or about workload automation itself. So it makes a lot of sense to actually do ISC integration, ISC tool integration. Last meeting, I wanted to bring this up in the SIG automation discussion, but the last meeting was we couldn't bring up this topic because of the time constraint. Hopefully tomorrow we'll be able to bring it back to the notice. With that said, Prashant, would you be able to provide a brief background because we have a lot of folks joining in today about what was the demo necessarily about and some highlights.
Yeah, last week's demo, right?
Yep. What was
Yeah,
the intention and the if you can
yeah.
briefly.
I'll share my screen quickly. Is my screen visible?
Yeah.
Okay. So before we used to, so this is about registering workloads and giving them SVIDs, IDs. So before, what we used to do was we used to uh, manually register it like using Kubernetes exec. But last week I showed a demo where we could do this automatically. 1 second. I'm going to show the custom resource that we made. So this is how we would. So this folder would be a KPT package, and in which we would define this PPID, the parent ID, and time to expire for both of them. And using selector, it's similar to this command only, except like we can now use it. We can now use it using kubectl apply. So that is what was shown in the last demo, and this is possible using the Spire controller manager, which they have. So there are no code changes, only applying all those custom resource and applying this KPT file, and the workload will be registered. So that was the demo that I showed.
A quick question, Prashant. I raised my hand. Do you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, I can.
So who is going to instantiate this? Because you say workload, it can also be a cluster, right?
Yeah, if you want to register a cluster, you can. This is basically registering a cluster. If you want to see
But
registering a workload, uh, this registers workload 1, for example. Now, as for who is doing that, we I think last time we discussed that there needs to be an approver for this. Like, we
yes.
need to decide beforehand which workloads will be registered, then make these YAML files, send them as a package, send it for approval, and so it goes through all that process. Is what I'm assuming. Similar to other things, right?
So basically, okay, so I see. So basically what you're saying is that during the hydration, so this is actually implemented using the hydration. And is this information, so during the hydration, and then once the approval happens, this is actuated. So that means this is all actuated on the management cluster, right?
Yes.
That's right, because the SPIFFE server is actually on the
Okay.
management cluster. Yes, in this case.
Yeah, I'm trying to get my head around it. So it's on the, okay. And the identities that are in here are, do we care that they are visible?
Sorry, what is the point? Wim, can you say that again? I
That they
didn't.
are visible in the spec? So in other words, everyone can look at the content.
Yes, yes, everyone can look
Yes.
at it. But the attestation logic ensures that only that particular workload should be able to attest that identity.
Yeah.
But that's an important point here. Right now, there are two types of attestation that are done, right? Like one is the node attestation, and then the other is the workload attestation, or the service attestation. Using the workload as a term might be a problem in the context of Nephew. So we are calling it services in general. So what we are saying is that when anyone creates a new service, the creation of the service, the package variant, along with that, the registration parameters will be specified. Basically, the SPIFFE ID will be specified, and that
Mhm.
SPIFFE ID is registered at the SPIFFE server when that workload is actually, or the service is actually deployed in the target workload clusters. The attestation will ensure that the identity is appropriately assigned to that particular service.
Mhm. Using the selectors and stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Correct. Yes. Yes. Using the selectors and namespace and service account and all those things. Yeah, using the selectors basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and that should then also be hydrated, I guess, right? So some of this information need to be customized, I think, because the workload name, for example, could be because now you instantiate a pod, but for example, yeah, so in other words, yeah, some of these parameters needs to be customized, right?
You mean dynamic?
Yeah, so for example, I mean, okay, right now you instantiate a pod, right? But most people instantiate a deployment, which means that the pod name you don't
Yeah, it
you
can
get
change.
like you
So
can get a
you can
even
change selectors to service
yeah
account,
yeah correct.
or
So we need to put them to some other places as well as like so. For example, we instantiate a network function, but then depending where we put it and like the namespace and stuff like that. So some of these parameters might be changed during the hydration phase. So even this that's also valid here, right?
So as of now, Vim, the parameters, the selectors, that combination that we have considered, which is namespace and service account, do you see that also changing during the hydration phase? I believe that won't change, right? Like, but if there are any other attributes that eventually that come up, that based on which we might want to attest, for example, region. Let's say, for example, there are 10 regional clusters that are getting spawned,
Uh-huh.
and then for each of the region, there is a region as an attribute that has to be attested. Then that becomes dynamic. Currently, yeah, it is all possible, but right now in the current this thing that is not taken into consideration. How to do that will be that's a different problem statement actually. Yeah.
Because right now, just to be clear, right? So the way it works right now, let's take service account as an example. That's not even the name of that service account is not even at the moment, let's say, identified or put in place at the management cluster. It's actually the controller that sits on the workload cluster that takes the NF deployment CR, and that's the one that is going to determine the name of the service account. Now, that doesn't mean we cannot change it. I'm just saying that's how it works right now.
I see. Okay. Okay. So that
Now, so that means that some of these parameters, there needs to be some coordination. And that's possible to do, right? But it's not how it operates right now.
yeah. This has to be explicitly then noted down, Prashant. Basically, we'll have to understand the flow because this is not in sync with our hypothesis for sure.
Mm,
But I'm not saying that we cannot fix that, Rahul, right? So
I
don't
see.
get me wrong, right? So, but I think we have to. What I was trying to point out is that the coordination of some of these selectors needs to be, yeah. In my view, they can even change, right? But at least as the coordination is adhered to, right?
Right, right, right.
Because, for example, we are advocating a template. Let's say take a network function, right? Let's say NF, but depending on where you deploy it, some of these parameters have different meaning. So that's kind of what happens in hydration at the management cluster right now during the specialization phase, right? So in other words, okay, Timo.
Tässä on taas 2 auki.
Okay, I think Timo is talking.
Oh, sorry. I'll go mute.
Yes, thanks. Yeah. What I'm trying to get to is, I think if they change at the management cluster, that's still okay in my view, not? As long as the coordination between the management and the workload cluster is adhered to, right? That's your assumption, I think. Am I still audible?
yeah.
So for example, just to give you a bit of a perspective. So today, let's say we have a template for SMF for Free Fire GC. Okay. Let's say you deploy 10 instances of it. Some of these parameters that you see, like even the name of the workload might be changed depending on where we deploy. You see?
Yeah.
So, but if at the management cluster, like each of these 10 SMFs have a different name and the identifiers are specific to that environment, I think your system still works with it, right? As long as when it expanded at the workload cluster, they adhere to these identifiers, we are good, right? I think that's how I understand.
That's
Or,
right.
yeah.
Hassan, one question. So Spire agent, they can dynamically generate the selector. Is that correct or not?
Spire agent can generate selectors.
Based on their runtime environment, because it can change. I think the Vim worry about how dynamically it changes. That's my understanding. So
So Bhuyan, in this context, right, like the selectors have to be registered. This, the Spire server needs to be told that when the service joins in, it's going to attest using these set of parameters. So the selectors have to be registered. Yeah.
Yes, but are you not doing the registration with this CRD or am I wrong?
Yeah. So the registration is done with this CRD. So we have
So in other
control
words,
over that. Yeah. What
say you put it into the package and we change, let's say, workload 1 to another name, right? But in a coordinated way. Before it gets actuated on the management cluster, you're still okay, right?
Yeah. True.
Yeah, so that's fine. As long as the selectors, so the service account is an interesting one because at the moment, the management cluster doesn't do anything for it. So it's the controller at the workload cluster that determines the name at the moment. So in other words, what has to happen is that name, we probably need to, instead of having him decide, basically dictate what the name should be, right? And that he adheres to that, right? So that should be easy to fix, is what I'm trying to say. So, but that's not what we do today.
Got it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to understand who does what and where is this used. I think it's important for, I don't know, other people, basically beyond me, to understand the consumption model.
Yeah. So one of the other things that, it's still a work in progress, but we are creating a detailed page explaining all these points. I'll give you a brief preview. So if you like any specific points to be considered, this is the outline of the document that we are working on.
Are you
To
sharing the
provide.
screen?
No, I've
Oh,
shared a link in the chat. This should be publicly viewable.
It's
Oh my,
forbidden.
oh, wait a second. Okay, what happened? Let me see if I can share. Sh- can you open up this link, please, Vishal?
No, it's
Oh,
still
sorry.
forbidden.
Oh my goodness. So
Do I need to sign in?
The forbidden 43, same error.
okay. Yeah, sorry about that. Can you open up the same link again? Now check.
So this one or
No, it's
both are
still
403? Yeah.
okay. Sorry,
Mhm.
sorry about that.
But it can be cached.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, that's weird. No permission. It seems given the no permissions. Okay. So basically there are.
Do you want to share your screen? You can show
Yeah, yeah.
us.
So okay. Let me share my screen. So the intention is to actually explain the use cases because at some point in time, whoever uh, will be doing some code review would need some sort of flow. So we wanted to explain the use cases for Nephew. This basically is in the same format, but this will have more details in terms of like why the specific SPIFFE ID, what kind of attestation logic has to be made use of. So it's going to be more detailed design document plus which takes into consideration all the user story templates as well. The aim is to educate, create awareness so that people who might eventually review it might need some context as well. So that's the aim that we want to do here, put in here. What I would like is, if there are any specific points that the team here would like to understand or being quoted in this particular document, then uh, then that we can make sure that we add it in the document before we send it across.
Mhm.
Yeah, again, this is a work in progress. This is still going to take some time. We initially thought that we might convert, at least I was initially thinking that we might easily convert the existing user story template as it is. But based on the some of the discussions that have happened in the ORAN working group, the other, the network architecture, SIG network architecture working group, there, some of the context there from there has to also be added here in this document.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Anything else that we want to discuss in this meeting, folks? One more thing is, just one more point. Yeah. So we are planning to target both secrets management as well as workload identity in the same this thing. So is that a good way to approach this? Because secrets management is tightly coupled with this with the whole workload identity scheme. Tightly coupled as in if you have identity, then secrets management becomes much easier. So we are planning to target both of those use cases as part of the same work item.
Yeah, I think Vish has his hand raised. I'll
Yeah, Vish.
answer. I'll have a.
No, I mean, since you asked, is there anything else to discuss? I was thinking if this discussion is a continuation, finish it, then I can ask.
Okay. So yeah, so let me try to reflect. Or well, is the question to me, Rahul, or to other?
Yeah, I mean, in general, the question, is it a good idea to actually handle secrets management in the same work item? Because we see that, while during the demo, right, like there was a necessity to actually showcase a use case as well. And the use case that Prashant and Shiv demonstrated was the secrets management use case. So it made a lot of sense. So we are thinking now that all that work is done, the only thing that remains to be done is the automation of the secrets management tool and those kind of things, right? Like that can be much easily handled. So that's the thought process right now. But again, would like to understand if there are any.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with it, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Vish, do you want to go ahead, please?
Yeah, my question is about how is the SIG security team getting involved in PR reviews, and what kind of is there any plan for the PR checks for catching anything in CI when a PR gets pushed? Are there any plans that has been discussed there?
Yeah. So when we started, right, like we said that there are certain automation tools that have to be integrated, but we found that at least in some cases there were some automation tool already in place. The only additional thing that we did in the last release was I think the signed release handling, right, like where the key that was used was a private key that was manually generated, so that automation we completed. But yeah, the intention eventually is to act beginning of this call we discussed the IAC scanning tool to be integrated. We see that that is a bigger value because Nefio fundamentally is essentially an infrastructure and infrastructure and network automation framework towards that extent, and having an IAC scanning tool integrated is going to be important. So that's one. But if there are any other suggestion as to specific things have to be done. So there are two aspects, right, which that you are saying. That one is how are we going to be involved? Uh, Currently, the involvement is passive in my opinion for all the PRs that are raised. The
Mm.
anything which is already automated, that is there in place, but there are certain additional automation that has to be put in place that we anyways will be doing. But from the PR review perspective and PR any of that perspective, right, like it's completely a passive involvement right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the idea is to, for
Mm.
example, when I was writing up, when me and Daniel were writing up the we had to come up with some custom security context constraints in OCP for some of the catalog, some of the elements in the catalog, the Karam bundles. So, and then there was some issues also raised about how we are using privileged true in some places and all that stuff. So, making sure that either if there's an active or some sort of automated tool that can go through and flag them and give feedback then rather than, finding it out later in somebody's trials. So that was the reason.
So Chekhov integration is something that we discussed in the last call. Chekhov is a tool that is Apache licensed. It's a brilliant tool actually, which can do scanning of not only Docker files but Terraform scripts, Kubernetes manifests. It can identify if there is a privileged containers that the manifest is actually asking for a privileged container to be deployed. All these checks are there. What we want to do is get a security assessment of the existing code based on that tool and then show its worth. So all the existing issues that we know, if it is able to highlight those issues directly, that's one indication that we are looking for. And then is there any other issues that that the tool will show? So that report we hope to showcase to the SIG security first and then SIG automation. In fact, that was the discussion that we wanted to have with the SIG automation in the last call, but as we all know that we discussed one particular item in the last call. So yeah, we want to bring all these points to the SIG automation meeting tomorrow.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, then any other points, any other point of discussion? I'm going to update the minutes of meeting later. I've taken some notes. Is there anything specific that Prashant, we discussed in the last call, right? Like there was some things. What are the next steps in terms of where do we want to go from here? Is the PR updated? That the PR is already raised, right? Like, but is that updated based on the updated demo that we have done? Do you think it makes sense to update it right now, or what do you think?
So there is one thing remaining that will complete the automation part, I guess. Uh, so I'll share my screen again. It's a small thing, but Is my screen visible?
It's still loading for me.
Okay. Still loading?
Yeah, it's still not visible for me at least.
I'll be sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. For Vault, right, we bind a rule, a
Hmm.
policy to a SPIFFy ID, and this is also done manually for now. But
Correct, correct,
I,
correct.
I was thinking if we could create a CRD that automates this part as well. So now we could do a kubectl apply and the rule will be created, is what I was thinking.
Does the Vault provide some these kind of resources out of the box?
That was I was checking, but I could not find anything significant.
Hmm.
But I'll see if Vault has it, or do we have to create our own CRD?
So now we are going into secrets management, right? Like what we are saying is that how do we apply authorization policies that this identity would be able to access these sensitive assets within the vault, right? Like that's what we are
Yeah,
saying.
yeah. This is the secrets management part, not
Yeah,
like
yeah,
workload identity is done. This is secret
right,
management. Yeah.
right. Now
So
again,
yeah, that
this,
is what is the
yeah.
work going on.
Mhm. Got it. Now, my belief is that when someone creates a workload or a package variant, uh, during that part itself, they would say that I need access to these particular assets within Vault, or these particular paths within Vault, and that authorization will be requested as part of pull request. Again, that's the flow that I'm envisaging. The devil is in the details, which I might not be completely aware of. Uh, what do you what does the team here thinks? Is that a rational thought process? Like the question is, if a workload or if a service has to request for access to a particular sensitive path, request to a particular uh, vault path, how would that authorization policy be specified by that service? That's the question. Yeah.
Now there is two steps, I think, right? So there is two things here. There is one is I think what we do at the moment, it's similar to the workload discussion we had before, in my view, right? Because
Mm,
when we do the hydration
mm,
for even for the secrets, let's
mm,
take that example.
mm.
Um, at some point, wait, so let me think to see. Yeah, take the example of config sync accessing Git,
Mhm,
right?
mhm. Yeah,
So let's take that example for now, right? So let's say we we will deploy config sync on a workload cluster, right? And
yeah,
that config sync needs access to the Git repo, right?
right,
Using a secret. So that's one use case, for example.
right.
So in other words, during the management uh, hydration phase at the management cluster, that let's say access requests is to be specified, right? Like you did before with the SPIFFy ID, right? We
Right.
basically, as part of that hydration process, we need to say this workload or this piece of configuration as part of the requirements is
Right.
access to a certain, let's say, secret or to a certain vault, what is
I
it,
see.
key, that he will need to get access to, right?
Right.
Then that has to be acted upon once someone approves the package, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then it follows the same flow, basically, right?
Yeah, it's the same flow, almost the same flow as like, what we
Yes.
discussed in the context of workload identity. Yeah, right. That makes
That's
sense.
and
That's
now if you access the cluster,
hmm.
that's a reverse direction So that's config sync. So basically our main use case that we have, there is one exception, I think, which is cluster creation, but most of our use cases are, let's assume there is a cluster, then you deploy stuff on top of that cluster, and those elements needs to then provide access to something, right? That is our majority of the use case we have, okay?
Right.
Now there is one exceptions to this, which is the Bootstrap secret manager, right? Which is here the situation is a little bit different. Wait, so let me show the flow that we have right now.
Right. Okay, that will be
To
great.
see how different it is. So what happens today is that management cluster gets spawned by copy that lives in the management cluster. So actually we go through the same flow. The difference is that the actuation is not happening on a remote cluster, but on the local cluster, right?
Right.
So in other words, we say to copy, spin up a cluster, and then it is copy that is going to create a secret for accessing that workload cluster. That's what happens right now. And then you remember, Prashant, that we have this Bootstrap controller that, so we use that secret for a short period of time to install a bunch of components. And then we give, then that access can be void, right? So that's the only different scenario that we have at the moment. You see what I'm saying is there, the flow is the secret gets created by the component that is being actuated. Whereas in the other way around is that we can determine the credentials or the elements he needs access to ahead of time. Whereas here it happens within that piece of software. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but even in that case, Wim, I see what you're saying, the cluster creation phase itself. But it's the management cluster who has access to so even in this case, there is a write access that is required by a service within the management cluster, which will then push the secret into the vault or the secrets manager. And then, but at the same time, the services, there will be some service at the workload cluster which will eventually do a request.
You're right. So basically what we discussed before, my memory is a bit short, is that there is a component that is a bit trusted, right? But like I was saying, for a little while, that is going to act upon the vault instantiation. And once that's in place, the keys of the kingdom disappear, right? You remember? Is that
Yeah. Okay. No, I vaguely remember, but this flow is going to be, this whole flow is not clearly understood actually. I have to admit that this flow is not clearly understood.
Yeah, so there is this, the problem that we have is that the secret that is being generated is owned by copy, of which we don't have control basically at the moment, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But we need that secret to be able to access that cluster.
So when you say we need that secret to access the cluster, the CAPI APIs would need that secret to access the workload cluster that is created, right?
No, so let's put it, maybe, and we can maybe do it differently. Maybe there is a different flow. But at the moment, what happens is that when copy creates a cluster, or when we create a cluster instantiated through copy, he also generates a secret for admin rights to that cluster. Okay.
Okay.
And we use that to install, let's say, config sync. We use it at the moment to install config sync.
Okay.
And once config sync is in place, we can remove that information from the system. We don't need those keys to the kingdoms anymore, right?
Okay, but the config sync is still in the same management cluster, right?
No, I'm here. So the flow that we have today is the following: copy, instantiate the workload cluster from
Okay.
the management cluster, right? So
Okay.
at the moment, so he
Right.
instantiates it. He also generates a secret that lives on the management cluster, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
The boots, so that is at the moment the bootstrap controller that I created, right? Picks that secret and installs config sync using that secret on the management cluster, on that new workload cluster.
Okay. And then deletes the secret. Okay.
No, at the moment we never delete the secret, but when we have this in place, that secret can be obsoleted basically, right? So you can.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
But I told Prashant you did some software that changed that flow a little bit, not?
So it was just copying the secret to Vault.
Yeah, you were
But
copying the secret to Vault. Yes, correct. So there was also this small step where you copied it to Vault and then you take it from there, basically, right?
yeah.
That was the difference. Yeah, correct. Yeah. Now I remember.
Without deleting anything from the Kubernetes secrets. But
Yeah, we could delete it. I mean, that's just an enhancement, right? But
Okay. So maybe
in
all
other
of
words,
this.
so Rahul, the flow is a bit different there, you see, because
Yeah.
there we just need to register the secret that was generated by the copy into Vault, you see?
Correct.
Whereas in the other flows, you kind of say to Vault, give me I want to get access to this, give me an identifier, right?
That's right. But even in this case, the point that you made, let's say the CAPI pushes the secret into Vault.
At the moment, it's not, but there is a tool. It's for copy. We have to change copy software to do so. So we have to do this
Okay.
step right now, right?
Okay.
Unless copy software changes that can access it directly, we can obsolete that piece of software. But at the moment, we don't. Unless we ask the copy guys to do it, I think it will create more time.
No. For that purpose, right? Like, so Wim, in general, we had a discussion about we are not going to make any changes to the application or
Yes,
workloads or services in general,
correct.
right? Like, so we would need some sort of CSI controller, basically, which can inject secrets from Vault directly into the corresponding pods and make it available in the standard paths where the workload is expecting.
Mm-hmm.
That would not require any changes to the actual services.
Correct.
So yeah, in case of CAPI, we have to check where is the CAPI expecting the secret to be kept, and then maybe so yeah, but that is a requirement across all the applications. We can't expect applications to change across so that it can handle secrets management. Like it picks up the secrets from that particular case.
Yeah, correct. That's also my view. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But in general, the flow is very similar to the SPIFFE ID, right?
Yes, indeed.
There's just a few. There's just one exception, as far as I can see at the moment.
Yeah. I think what we need is a set of action items that are created, which we, maybe in the next discussion, this is something that we can bring up, the action plan. Like, step 1, step 2, step 3. You already have it, Prashant, in some shape or form. But from the secrets management too, we can,
Yeah, but I think, Rahul, let's first solve the majority, the major use case, okay?
Yeah.
Because there's always exceptions, right? So if we solve the major use case, which is providing access or secrets access or access control
Okay.
towards applications, right? That is the majority of the use case. Then the exception one, let's treat them as second priority. That's how I look at it.
No,
Personally.
that's true. No, that's what. So eventually, the action items that we identify, right? Like that will be assigned a priority, right? Like, and we can take up the easy low hanging fruit first.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Anything else, folks? All right, then. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for this discussion. Have a good day, good week ahead. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.